Okay, so this may not have anything to do necessarily with ostomies. I'm just giving you a fair warning, but this has a lot to do with my brand. So I just did a video on adaptable clothing, but in that there's another issue that I believe needs talking about, and that is sustainable clothing. We are becoming a society that's becoming more aware of our environmental impact in, resources, and taking resources from the earth, in how much we consume, how much we throw away, what we buy and don't need. Recently, in the last several years, become more aware of my past consumption, my past need, I thought, for certain brands or certain things. More aware of buying things that are used if I can. And it wasn't necessarily because it was more necessarily out of necessity, not desire. But it did lead me to understanding that the choices I was making were making a big impact, and not only in my financial respect, but in society and in the global industry as a whole. And so when I came up with an adaptable clothing design, I had already been living a minimalist lifestyle, and I knew that I had to maintain my sense of beliefs. I had to stay on track with that, which is why I chose to make my underwear brand here in the United States, despite knowing that I was going to pay more money. However, persistence is the key, and I did find a company that I think was actually very comparable to outsourcing. Sure, ultimately it might be off a few dollars per unit, but ultimately I believe, one, that I made the right choice because of so many different reasons that I can bullet point from there. But the main bullet point would be that fair ethics. So fair labor practices. There are many brands besides my brand out there to being sustainable, but also to seeing fair wages, safe working environments, the ethical treatment of their workers. And I think here in obviously in the United States, that's far more regulated than other places. So there was that. The other thing was thinking about supply chain issue. Specifically, we saw during COVID supply chain issues, and now we're seeing that there are some issues going on the East Coast and thinking about supply chain. I think that we probably will see a huge supply chain issue in the near future. And even if we don't, I feel more comfortable making my brand here in the United States. But ultimately, I feel more morally ethical knowing that I am making my undergarments here in the United States. Why we need sustainable fashion. So there are so many companies out there creating cheap, disposable clothing, exploiting their workers in those developing countries. But not only that, they are also knocking off designers whose artwork is here. And it's an art. And I think we forget that sometimes. But fashion design, outside of what I do, specifically fashion designers are having their brands knocked off. And that's not fair. And we need to protect our art because people put their hearts and souls into doing those things. So when we see these big companies really targeting us with the ads and targeting our younger people with the ads and the idea of providing them fashionable clothing at such a cheap rate, it's so hard to compete with that. I understand. here are a few ways that I think we can combat that, right? So we could shop mindfully, okay? We can look at this piece of clothing, regardless of the expense of it, and say, do I love this? Look at the quality of it over the quantity. So there's a lot of people that I've seen do these capsule wardrobes, which is something I would like to get into, by basically having like, X amount of pieces of clothing and them being interchangeable with things to change up the look and look like you wearing something else, but you're kind of reusing. And on that note, I used to think that if you were these big brand names that charge an extravagant amount, that was bad. And I'm starting to understand now that these are really, they're timeless pieces. And I didn't understand that before. Like, a new vintage thrift and vintage designer thrift was like a thing, but I didn't understand why. I'm always about the vintage or thrift. I love that. But to find out that they're actual pieces that have just standed the test of time. And so if you are somebody who has that money, you're able to put that money into these sustainable garments that aren't made. Sure, some of them may be overseas. I don't really know all of them, but more than likely they're handcrafted, which means they're high quality. High quality is going to last longer. You're paying for what you get. I get it now. What else can you do? You can shop, like I said, vintage and thrift. I think that vintage and thrift is where it's at. There are those big name companies that you know who I'm talking about, who are giving these younger crowds of, I should say younger because I'm 44, so people who are younger than me, or just my age, I don't know, people all over the age group categories are buying from this specific company. And I'm not going to say the name, but you all know who they are. And you're right, they're cute, we can't compete, etc. I will buy that clothing in a thrift store. I will take that clothing when somebody gives it to me. I somehow ended up with like 10 pieces of clothing from this company, but not because I bought it, but because it was given to me, or I found it at a thrift store. That I understand, because now we're reusing. We're making that piece last longer because somebody didn't want it. Somebody bought it to wear it once and get rid of it. And we're giving it an extra life. And that's the least we can do at that point. Will I buy from that company? No. Have I once? Yes, once. Will I ever again? No. Especially not after I started my own company doing this. And I see what's going on. All right. And the amount of water is put into making those cheap fabrics that those come from. It's ridiculous. It's not good for our environment. And another thing I will say about that, it's always questionable when you are making fabric and having clothing made that you are using resources at some point. It's safe to say that, is my product the most sustainable? No. Am I trying? Yes. So it's about making conscious effort to do something. And it doesn't have to be that you buy those specific clothing. You don't have to buy specifically just made in the USA. But you can start changing little things. You could start buying more thrift, buying more vintage clothing, designer clothing, or buying those pieces that are going to last long if you have the money to do so. So yeah, it's about becoming more aware and making more conscious choices. It's about replacing with sustainable brands if possible. It's about looking for more eco-friendly materials, trying to follow your care instructions on your clothing to make them last longer. That's important. A lot of people don't do that. I never used to until now. I know what my brand needs. And so following my care instructions It's about, just the, trying to support people and companies that are making more of an effort to stop exploiting workers, using less waste, trying to find eco-friendly materials when possible, and reusing, upcycling, and trying to get the most out of things. Following your care instructions. Those are the main points I really wanted to hit on. Sustainability isn't a trend. It's definitely a movement, and it's about ethical and being eco-conscious because your choice matters. So I just urge you to, whether you need adaptable clothing or you're someone who, you're just buying a garment for something else, just start looking at your choices. Start looking at, going to thrift stores first. If you don't find it at a thrift store, look online, find something online. If it's not, try to find a brand that really supports something, or hope, something for the earth, something organic or something eco-friendly, or at least something made in the USA, something like, it's about making better choices. Thanks for listening and taking the time to hear my spiel on sustainability. Thank you.